I only covered this a little bit because I don't really know that much about economic stuff, so I don't want to like just talk out of my ass completely. Here's what to know about the collapse of China's Evergrande property developer. Unable to restructure the 300 billion it owed investors because they kept like building on debt, building on debt, building on debt, build more, debt more, build more, debt more. As long as the investments pay off, like the debts are fine because they pay back, right? But the 50 billion fraud just came out recently, like today. Oh, that's an additional thing? Evergrande accused of 78 billion in fraud. Wait. Let me find a different video.
A Lehman period, because Evergrande's troubles continue. They were once the largest property firm in China. Their founder was the country's richest man, but now he's been banned from the financial markets, and that's just the tip of it. Evergrande has been accused.
Anyone want to take odds on this guy getting like beheaded on a stand in front of the entire Chinese populace? Like everyone crowds into the Forbidden City to watch this guy get guillotined.
Of financial fraud, of inflating their annual revenues. Do you know by how much?
Is this drip? Yes. She is a Modi propagandist. Okay, I mean, I can't. We're just learning about this, okay? But yes, it's drip. I've always felt like drip in India, they know how to make clothes shiny and they know how to make clothes colorful. And in the West, we've forgotten this ancient technology, and I think that's sad.
Almost $78 billion, which makes this China's biggest fraud case. And what's the punishment? So far, it's a fine. Evergrande has been asked to pay $580 million. It's not clear how they will pay this money, though, because the company is bankrupt. Evergrande is valued at $275 million. Their total debt is $300 billion. So good luck paying that fine. China began this investigation around 8 months ago. They found Evergrande had fudged their sales. As a result, they could report inflated profits, almost 63% higher in 2019. And 87% higher in 2020. China's regulators are blaming Evergrande's founder for this. His name is Hui Ka-yan. He graduated from college in 1982. He then worked at a steel factory for 10 years.
I wouldn't be talking your favorite color for is brown for clothes, no offense. What does that even mean? Is there something wrong with brown clothes? There's like 50 trillion shades of brown. What are you on about?
And in 1996, he started Evergrande, whose method of expansion was debt. The country was going through a property boom, so China's state banks were more than willing to help him. He built more than 1,000 housing projects in China, more than 1,000 projects. And in 2009, he took the company public. But trouble started in 2021. That's when China shut the loan tap. So suddenly, Evergrande could not repay its creditors. Their expansion was stalled. That same year, it defaulted on loans. We've heard a lot of speculation since then, a lot of doomsday predictions, but the impact has been largely contained.
We'll see, I guess. Evergrande's liquidators say company SJ withdraw Chapter 15 applications in U.S. Withdraw their bankruptcy protection applications. Oh no. I don't know how contained this is going to end up being in the long run, you know? Like, what if this is essentially just like a public flag that the main investment vehicle in China, which has been property development, is actually worthless and was a bubble this whole time and has been overvaluated this whole time. And you know, like where do you go from there, right? Where does the market move to?
Which brings us to this fraud case. What message is China trying to send here? That the golden age is over. No more cheap loans, no more regulatory freebies, and no more unchecked expansion. China is saying, look, the bad apples are out. We are punishing Evergrande and its founder, and we are cleaning up the property sector. China's housing minister issued a stern warning this month. He said if developers are struggling, they should go bankrupt.
For real estate enterprises that are severely insolvent and have lost their ability to operate, they should undergo bankruptcy and restructuring following the principles of rule of law and marketization. Actions that harm the interests of the masses will be resolutely investigated and punished, and those who play unlawful games will be held accountable.
Will investors buy it, though?
Oh yeah, our official ruling on this is that if you have no money, you should go bankrupt. If you have no money and you don't go bankrupt and you make speculative investments anyway off of loans, we will drag you to the Forbidden City and we will execute you on TV in front of everyone.
Well, confidence is still low. Property investments fell 9% in January and February. Property sales plunged almost 21%, and new constructions were down 30%. So the answer is no. Investors are not buying it. What is China doing to change that? Last month, a big decision was announced. Beijing made its biggest reduction to its mortgage rates. The idea was to encourage home buyers. They also launched...
That's not going to be enough. Wait, hold on. China mortgage. How much of a reduction? China slashes mortgage reference rates to revive property market. These are like desperation moves. Slashing mortgage rates right after a company goes under for like massive debt and fraud. You know, like this is like China announced its biggest ever reduction in the benchmark mortgage rate on Tuesday. 25 points cut 5-year LPR was lowered by 25 basis points to 3.95 to 4.2% previously, with a 1-year LPR was left unchanged at 3.45. I expected them to go harder. At least they're off the weed number. Ah, yeah, here you can see like how much it's gone down relatively. They keep making it go down. They want people to buy houses desperately, but people can't afford houses. You have all these empty buildings. Would a recession from this cause the invasion of Taiwan? I think that, yeah, the more economic trouble China is in, the more likely its leaders are to turn towards stuff like that as a way of keeping the population unified. Yeah.
A whitelist mechanism. Basically, a few property developers were identified, the ones with potential. These firms got funds from state banks, but clearly more needs to be done here because the property sector is key to China's growth. This sector makes up 20% of their revenue, 70% of the household wealth, and 25% of China's GDP. Unless this sector revives, China cannot regain its mojo. And a few penalties may not be enough because Evergrande...
Yeah, I'm looking here, see? Even China's population of 1.4 billion would not be enough to fill all the empty apartments littered across the country, a former official said on Saturday in a rare public critique of the country's crisis-hit property market. China's property sector, once a pillar of the economy, has slumped since 2021, since Evergrande, blah, blah, blah. Big name developers, da, da, da. At the end of August, the combined floor area of unsold homes stood at 648 million square meters, or 7 billion square feet. The largest data from the National Bureau of Statistics shows. That would be equal to 7.2 million homes, according to Reuters calculations, based on the average home size of 90 square meters. So if there's 2 people in each house, that'd be 14 million people space. If it's 4 people per house, then it would be, you know, a 28 million people space. This does not count the numerous residential projects that have already been sold but not yet completed due to cash flow problems. So how many vacant homes are there now? Each expert gives a very different number, with the most extreme believing the current number of vacant homes are enough for 3 billion people, said He King, 81, former deputy head of the Statistics Bureau. Jesus. That estimate might be a bit much, but 1.4 billion people probably can't fill them, he said at a forum in the southern Chinese city Dongguan, according to a video released by the official media Chinese news service. Holy shit. Guys, this has been the main investment vehicle in China for decades and decades and decades. And basically, they're in a position now where there are so many empty rooms, so many empty houses, but people still can't afford them because the price of these properties and homes are completely detached from their actual market need. Like, there's no incentive to build new housing in an environment like this. If anything, the fact that this is being said, like, this is quite rare, you know? All sorts of comments predicting the collapse of China's economy keep surfacing now and again, but what has collapsed is such rhetoric, not China's economy, a spokesperson at the foreign ministry said at a recent news conference. Yeah, you really don't want stuff like this being said because it's pretty bad. Not to mention the population of China is decreasing. Yeah, China lost population last year. It's not like these houses need to be filled with new people, you know? They lost population last year. So will the prices drop and then reattach? Well, that would be the sane thing to do. This is actually an example of the Chinese government not going far enough in state control. They should have completely decommodified housing, or at the very least set price caps, or had these companies be like government controlled. The problem is this is their main vehicle for speculative investment, which means that a huge portion of their economic growth has been based on companies being lunatics when it comes to building and investing in housing. And if you're doing that and your economy is based on that, then you can't really nationalize the whole thing because then you're basically shutting out the entire economy. Is this bad to have lots of homes people can live in? If housing is a commodity, yes, it's terrible. Yeah, the real estate sector is like a huge portion of their economy. This could be ruinous. There were a lot of China will collapse in 26 days videos on YouTube a few years back. Neocons love to like extol the, you know, the inevitability of China's collapse. I'm not talking about China collapsing. I'm talking about it having a big bad recession, you know, like a really, really bad one. Would it not be better for them to bite the bullet and nationalize housing now? Easier said than done. turn the empty buildings into hotels and office buildings. They don't need that either. And it would be very expensive. Look at the amount of time needed to buy an apartment. Yeah, shut the fuck up. 20 years of work for an apartment. Blue is 2011, orange is 2021. Average years a skilled employee needs to work to afford a 60 square meter apartment near the city center. In Hong Kong, up to 20 years now. Jesus Christ. Paris, 17. London, 14. Tokyo, 13. Singapore, 13. New York, 9. Munich, 9. Sydney, Frankfurt, Zurich. But it goes even further in some cities, right? They can't even use most of those homes because they're tofu dregs. Buildings built so poorly, they're not connected to infrastructure or safely livable. It's so... Yeah, not even to speak of the quality of this housing. Outside all the terrible economic consequences of this, will the price of housing go down as a result? Maybe? I mean, it could, but even if it did, that wouldn't fix the problem. The problem is that the main vehicle for economic growth in China, which has been investment in housing, is no longer it has been signaled publicly as a non-viable market a direction to go thing. Like, that is just not a viable market to invest in. It's not, it's so much larger than just housing. It's like the money in China has popped. The bubble has popped. Luckily, only authoritarian countries are really exposed to this risk. Basically, no one outside of China, a few foreign oligarchs hold this housing, but the political and supply chain problems would hurt the global economy. Well, yeah, of course, it'll affect everyone. It's China. They're a huge country, you know? Risk being debt. Well, that is a problem. Xi Jinping has de-emphasized growth in recent years. His priorities have changed. Yeah, much like I have de-emphasized getting laid tonight after, like, striking out with 14 girls at the club. You know, my priorities have changed. 3 hours in, I'm coming down from my buzz, and there's not a girl in the club left who will talk to me. I'm reorganizing my priorities. You know, I'm actually here to have a good time with the lads, basically. I don't know, Claire Lovelace. I assume that's just like without spending on other stuff. Vaush, China has local and central governments. The housing bubble was formed by local governments to serve the guidelines of the central government. So now they feel betrayed by Xi and his ilk. This is how empires collapse. I don't know enough about it to really say. I would have to like learn more before I could really say anything like that. That narrative makes sense to me though. This is a lot of reading, and I am not an economics student. Like, come on, man. Yeah, thank you. Subjected to now that I know. Yeah, sorry, this is a bit too information dense for my level of education on the subject. What I'm trying to say is Western and global banks won't go bust, but Western and global consumers will hurt. Yeah. Well, we might get cheaper Funko Pops out of this. More Temu deals. More Temu deals. Let's go, boys. Stop exposing how these tanky countries inevitably suck. It's not, no, my argument is that China should have been more tanky. Like, no. I'm not taking the like, you've done market economy wrong perspective. I think they should have nationalized housing. I think they should have gone farther. That was the problem, okay? The Dengist reforms have, the mandate of heaven was lost by China when the, Dengism took hold, okay? I think that, they should still have one glorious leader whose portrait is held above every classroom, who just one day wakes up and announces that like every peasant must kill every sparrow they see, or like one day he proclaims, China would build 1 billion houses by the end of the year, and it just happens, and they're all like wooden shacks assembled by children. You know, that's what I want. Okay, we could do better. Want neo-Maoism?
And is not the root problem in China. It's a symptom of the larger mismanagement.
Oh, okay. True. Well, now we know. That's partially a joke, right? Yeah, a joke. Really, though, I do think that housing should be decommodified. I don't think that housing should ever be thought of as an investment vehicle. I think that, like, historically just has really bad outcomes, and contemporarily has really bad outcomes. Like, obviously. It's like I think that's an easy sell economically. What does that mean in practice, though? What it sounds like, decommodifying housing. Like, housing should be managed by the state or by a government-controlled business that has price caps and builds in accordance with political goals in the region rather than what would make them money, you know? It's not a perfect way of handling things, and handling that correctly would be really complicated, right? There's no, like, easy, simple solution to any big economic problem, like managing housing for a country of 1.4 billion people. There's no easy, perfect way of doing it, but I think that, like, yeah, I think that for the most part, I think that you should lean towards decommodification. Thoughts on a small sector renters guild? I don't have an issue with renting. I think the obsession with owning one's own home is, I was about to say fascist. What do I actually mean? Fascist. Yeah, f*** you. No, sorry, you will rent and you will like it. The idea, like, the problem is that, like, there are two ways you can live in a house, right? Like, really live in a house. You can own it or you can rent it. And do you really want to own a house every time you move? What if you're just moving for college? What if you're going to a new town and you don't know if you'll like the job you're getting there yet? Do you want to own that, buy that, mortgage that house, and then if you move out have to sell it again? No, of course you don't, idiot. You want to rent it. You want to rent it from the government. That's what you want to do. I don't have an issue with homeownership fundamentally. Like, I don't think it's necessarily bad. I also just don't have an issue with renting. The problem is a lot of people like homeownership because they treat owning a home like an investment itself. They basically do a small-scale version of the same thing corporations do, where rather than doing speculative investment on a wide scale, you speculatively invest in the property you live in because now that's like a pool of money that you can sell off in the future, and the assumption that housing prices rise. But housing prices aren't going to rise, are they? Because the system's been decommodified, hasn't it? So that's out. Now owning a house just means you own the house. It doesn't mean it's a gigantic pool of wealth you get to dip into in the future, right? Like, that would kind of break the decommodification thing if you could buy it and then sell it. What we're really talking about is the land doesn't belong to anyone. It's controlled by different people. And if you own it, what that means is you're basically just long-term renting it. And I'm fine with that, you know? Maybe there are some ways you could carve out exemptions for that in certain areas especially, but for the most part, whatever. I don't think that, like, the housing market should be commodified, a system which causes immeasurable suffering just for the fantasy that you can, like, own a house and give it to your descendants or whatever, as though the descendants wouldn't have just sold it anyway, which happens all the time these days, you know? People get houses given to them by their grandparents or their great aunts or great uncles, but they don't want to live in bum nowhere, Arkansas, so they just sell it on the market. You know, they're like, oh, my so-and-so died, like, I own this house now over here, but I don't want to live there, so I'll sell it. And then the cycle continues. So I just, yeah. You have no idea what your descendants are going to want to do, what they're going to want. If you want them to live in the same house as you, they can just keep renting the same property from the government. And again, it would be super cheap because it's decommodified. No, I agree, Athean. It was the same with Margaret Thatcher, where she, like, got a bunch of middle-class people indebted to her government by giving them, like, a really easy end to ownership in the suburbs. Have any countries decommodified their housing? Many have to some extent. I don't think any have to the extent that I would like. The issue is you'll literally have to fight each current homeowner who have the majority of their wealth in their house. Well, that's cool, because if I'm the government, I also have the U.S. military, so I could easily defeat each current homeowner with the majority of their wealth in their house if I had the U.S. military on my side. I think I could decommodify housing pretty well. You know, I don't think they'd pose too much trouble. Obviously, if massive house decommodification was done, people would be given, enormous amounts of money from the government, right? Like, the government wouldn't just steal, the government would pay. If they aren't happy with the amount they would get, they can die mad. Sorry. You would try to negotiate a fair deal, but we're not keeping humanity enslaved to commodified housing indefinitely just because a bunch of boomer homeowners want $3 million for their shitty San Diego houses, okay? No. Do you think rental companies are better than landlords? Rental companies are landlords. Every single one, really? What does decommodified housing mean to you? Do you think that means you get to sell some houses? Like, decommodified housing means, only half the houses get sold? How about housing co-ops? Cooperatives are businesses. You know that, right? Like, a housing cooperative means that it would be collectively owned by the people there, but that still means it's capital that can be sold and purchased. Housing cooperatives are a good thing to invest in the now, but the long term, the ultimate long term, is total decommodification. Well, yeah, Archrabe, I'm not saying that it's possible to do right now. I'm just saying it's a long-term goal. Now, I meant you'd really want the U.S. Army to fight every single homeowner in the country? No, I was being facetious. You would buy the land off them. We do that with eminent domain all the time. We would just do it on a mass scale. Sure, yes. Chow wants me to say yes. How would pricing work for rent in a decommodified world? I don't think it would. I mean, you would either pay, like, basically nothing, or you would pay a tiny flat rate or something to that effect. Would nicer neighborhoods have higher rent? You think there would be nicer neighborhoods? Oh, that's step 2, baby. Step 1 is the Pentagon seizes houses from every bloated fucking boomer San Diego land, homeowner, Step 2 is we evenly distribute the niceness of the neighborhoods. Yeah, you thought your HOA was bad. We'll show you. Yeah. Listen, okay? Here's how communism will work. Every month, the government will give you a $5 bill. Rent is $2 a month, and ice cream is $1. So you get 3 ice creams a month, and that is the economy, okay? You will be happy. You will think, I can't wait to get my 3 ice creams per month, and you got to watch out. You have to be fiscally responsible, because if you get 5 ice creams in 1 month, you don't have the $2 for rent. But if you're responsible and don't have all your ice creams in 1 month, then you get to spend more on ice cream the next month because it carries over. The amount of money carries over. You could have 2 $5 bills at once. Well, what if you're a vegan and can't eat dairy? Well, you'd still be able to pay rent. Wiki says housing co-op is nonprofit. Yeah, but they may be nonprofit, but they're still a corporation. Like, nonprofits are still corporations, which means they're still commodified. I'm not saying that housing cooperatives are bad. I'm just saying that if you've already fully decommodified housing, what would the point of them be? How do segments like these track with lefty Redditors? I'm sorry. The fact that I'm a socialist is not exactly a secret in this channel. Obviously, I support total housing decommodification. It's not a secret. What would happen to people who can't pay rent? You mean if you didn't have the $2? Presumably liquidation. What do you think about the idea of not having rent in the way you're talking about, but in fact you do buy and own your home? There are bigger homes you can buy for more. Whatever homes could be bought and sold to the government, who control pricing, being the sole trade venue for all home sales. You also type at this point you're basically just long-term renting. I mean, if you're buying it from the government, but you can only sell it back to the government, and the amount you're buying it for tracks to the amount you would be long-term renting paying it for, I don't know what benefit you're really getting from that apart from the legal fantasy of ownership, you know? It seems like at that point you basically just be constructing like the aesthetic of home ownership, when in reality, like, that's not, like, it wouldn't really be the case. What would you do about the suburban neighborhoods? Well, they'd have to be bulldozed and rebuilt, of course. How will different sizes and qualities of homes function in the same system? Under a decommodified housing system, there wouldn't be massive differences in the quality and sizing of houses. You would have some that are built for individuals, like, 1 bedroom studios, right? Like near universities and stuff. The kind of stuff that you would want if you were like a student or something, you know? You'd have ones that are for families, but there wouldn't be mansions being built. Nobody gets that. Why should anyone get that? Nobody does. Much in the same way that under decommodified healthcare, you wouldn't have, like, rich people getting to get like $4 million ultra medical coverage or whatever. You would split the difference and just make sure everyone gets really good medical coverage. You wouldn't just have like, you would more evenly proportion this value out. I don't know how Singapore does housing, am I right? These prices are wild. Yeah, well, there would still be preferred areas to live though, right? Yeah, maybe they would be more in demand. I don't think the government should then charge more for rent for those. That would kind of destroy the idea of decommodification a bit. This is an utterly take. You can't perform a lot of basic home maintenance on rental properties. Don't you think the rules for renting would be different? I'm talking about a transformative economic upheaval that isn't happening anytime soon. Like, you don't think something like what you can and can't do to a property while renting it you don't think these factors are available to change or be shifted? How the would the federal US do local maintenance? What do you mean? The United States government on a federal, state, local level would be responsible for all housing. They would be everywhere. You wouldn't have to go to Washington to get your pipes unfrozen or your shower fixed, No, much in the same way that today, if you want something done from like a rental group or like a landlord or whatever else, it would be like local offices run by the government. It would be just another civic service that you could manage, same as traffic being collected from your house, Yeah, it'd be a big old department. But also, the rules on what you can or can't do when it comes to home maintenance could obviously be shifted around, Traffic, did I say traffic collection? Trash collection. I guess traffic collection as well. It wouldn't be centralized the federal government. That'd be a little bit bloated. It wouldn't be like the IRS or anything. Yes, mixed-use zoning should be the default, for sure. Please read this. It's what the Canadian government is doing to help the housing crisis. This is a lot of text for somebody who's talking to chat right now. The Liberals are reviving a World War II plan to ease the housing crisis. Here's what that means. The plan involves creating a catalog of pre-approved housing designs to speed up the construction of homes, which will streamline approvals process, get new homes built more quickly. Great. Yeah. Why shouldn't the government be invested in this? The government manages all the regulations that determine how houses are built anyway. Wouldn't it be a lot faster for the regulating group and the construction group to be one and the same? Like, Wouldn't that be better than having to like do this constant back and forth approval process? Copy paste houses like McDonald's. Trust me, private corporations already do. Drive through any new development suburb in America and you'll see. Vaush, you're assuming state federal departments are competent enough to consistently collect trash. Okay, liberal. If you're unironically doing the, but how will McGovernment handle this thing? Yeah, obviously modern governments are incompetent. Yeah, I'm not denying that. If you think corporations would do a better job securing your long-term interests in any kind of municipal sense, like through utilities or whatever else, then you're free to procure evidence of that fact. No, obviously I'm advocating here in favor of competent government management, but I don't think that's like an unreasonable ask here. We already live in a system where corporations consistently f this up. So I think that you could argue for policies and adjustments to how things are done in a way that would secure a reasonable assumption that the government would do a better job. It wouldn't do a perfect job. You would still gripe about your local government. That's part of life, by the way. That's just like, that's part of living, you know? Griping about local government, they did something too slow or too poorly. It's never going to be perfect. I just want it decommodified. So while it's not perfect now and it's not perfect then, at least you're not bankrupting yourself trying to pay rent then, you know? That's my hope. Some people do build their own houses. Well, it's the land the government owns. You can have the house, the land is the government's. The builder is entitled to control the product of their labor, aren't they? No, not necessarily. Am I still allowed to punch holes in the drywall? Yes. The communist government that I control recognizes the fact that fixing holes in drywall is actually really easy. Like, it's insanely easy. You can do it for like $5. You just get the drywall paste thing and you put it on and then you flatten it and you apply the texture and then you're good. A spackle. Yeah. Can I punch holes in my concrete wall? If you can, I think you should be allowed to, yeah. Would egging a house now be felony vandalism? I mean, whatever penalty you get for egging like a government municipal building would probably be the same penalty that you'd get for doing that then. Simply don't build with drywall in the first place. Drywall's good. Drywall's useful. Stuff that makes construction cheaper, you know, it's easy to fix and replace, it's modular. Drywall's good. You know, it just needs to be done well. A lot of houses that get built, they get built like this. It's all so rushed and they don't do a good job. Why isn't drywall used in Europe? Because they're stupid. They haven't learned it yet. They don't even know what it is. Doesn't drywall make everyone hear everyone? If you pack it with insulation in between the drywall boards, it's usually fine. Even liberals fight against the decommodification housing? Well, yeah, of course they do. Liberalism, the economic ideology of liberalism is capitalism. Decommodification is the opposite of capitalism. It's taking something away from the market. Of course they would. They would be the greatest enemies of it, if anything. You know, because conservatives are occasionally okay with nationalization, usually in the service of, well, nationalism, you know. There are fascists who, to varying degrees, are accepting of the state taking control of stuff, not because they want it to be cheap and available to everyone, of course, but because they want the state to use its power to oppress minority groups in that market. Liberals are the most active advocates against decommodification. Vaush, who will own my toothbrush? You can rent your toothbrush. Mass home ownership doesn't track even with capitalism, though. It's essentially feudal. Yeah, well, that's because it's not just ownership, it's renting as well. And the commodification of housing is a mostly capitalist phenomena. Ownership, of course, you know, I mean, technically, no regular people didn't own their homes in feudal times. All that land belonged to the lord. They were serfs. They came with the land, right? Like, that wasn't really their house. It's just the lord didn't really care to micromanage their shit on the land that was theirs. You know, that would kind of left it to your devices. Oh, it's a bit more complicated than that, rubber duck, but, you know, in the spirit of things. You can decommodify housing by making it personal property and not private property. You don't have to give the home and land to the state. I have no idea what you're talking about. What do you mean personal property, not private property? If you own it, if it's your property, you can own it and sell it. It belongs to you. And if you can't sell it, that means that it's just yours, in which case it's not only not decommodified, it's just removed from the market entirely and from anyone else, which isn't better, that's worse. If only the government could rent out houses, would that make housing prices go down? Well, it depends on if the government's like decommodifying it or if they're just making money off of it. Could a government switch to decommodified housing without ruining the country's economy? Yes, but it would take a lot of time and hard work. It's not an easy thing to do. Lamau, people thinking decommodification means Stalin. Yeah, Stalin, notably, didn't really decommodify most of the industries that he presided over, you know? In reality, they were just like split up into a big functional state capitalist oligarchy where high-ranking members of the party would delegate control of facilities to varying people based on their political patronage, effectively. and then they would just kind of like arbitrarily try to meet guidelines. It was basically just dumb capitalism, really. It's not meaningful. Also, that's a whole economic thing. I'm just talking about housing as a speculative vehicle here. We're not really talking about the broader economy, just housing. For what it's worth, though, to the extent that they could do it, housing in the Soviet Union was a lot better than it is today in America. You can go take a look at the average like proportion of a Soviet worker's pay was spent on rent, or I could do it. The price of a 3-room apartment grew from about 10 rubles in 1970s to 20 rubles per month in the 1980s. What was the average rent payment was about 3% of a person's income. I bet a lot of you people are paying 10 times that or more. Everything was heavily reduced and subsidized by the state. Yeah, that was one of the few instances where the Soviets objectively, mogged the West economically. I mean, Tanky Annihilator, it would. The distinction between personal and private property is that personal property is when you own something that you want to reserve it for personal use, and private property is something that you own because you want to see other people's need for it, extract something. Yeah, but that doesn't really apply to housing. Like, if you own it, you own it. How do you distribute the personal property then? It's land. What do you mean? It's land. The government owns the land and manages the housing. What do you mean? We're just talking about land. How do you avoid corrupt dealings with housing? I don't think there's any way to avoid corruption. You do the best you can. Applied to housing, the personal property would be the one you have designated as your residence, and the private property would be seized by the government. I don't understand this distinction as it applies to housing decommodification. Who decides who lives where, though? Well, right now you decide who lives where through like an arcane exclusive process of references and having enough money. So I imagine that instead we would just do like, references. You probably go to like a local council to petition your interest in a house in the area and what your preferences are. Like if you want to move to a new city, you could like file a preemptive application or do like an online interview with some local bureaucrat, and you would say like, hey, I am a student and I'm moving to this area, so I'd like something close to the university and da-da-da. And they would be like, okay, based on what you've said, here are some available listings that we can hold for 2 weeks. Do any of these look good to you? Or if you'd be like, hey, I've got a larger family and we have like 3 pets. We were hoping for a bit like of a roomier space. And they would go, okay, we've got something like that. It's a little further out from the city, but here you go. Like, does this look good or does that look good or whatever? And something to that effect, Obviously, this sounds kind of utopian, but I really don't think it is, like, at all. It actually seems pretty straightforward to me. It would just be another government department. There would be inefficiencies and bureaucracy and, there'd be some fuss. But I think it's probably preferable to the massive, insane, horrible housing situation we have today. It would not be easy to implement, but it could certainly be done. There's nothing logistically difficult about what I've described. Like, nothing that I've described is like moon logic stuff. It would just be another basic bureaucratic service. You could call your local government bureaucrats and ask for a lot of stuff right now. You can call and ask about plumbing or like any manner of utility or like anything regarding like local. There are so many local numbers you could call where you can talk to a bureaucrat and whine about something. I swear to God. The processes exist. No, Vaush, it directly translates as you as a property owner can only own the specific home you live in under a personal property system. You cannot own a ton of property rented out. No, Alison Avani, it has to be decommodified. So if you move out of the home that you're in, then that would go to the state. That's decommodification, right? If you're saying you want it to be yours while you live there, you're just describing renting again, functionally. I don't know what what matters is what happens to the housing after you don't live there anymore. Vaush doesn't know the difference between decommodification and personal property. Tanky Annihilator, you don't understand anything that you're talking about here, okay? The personal private property distinction refers to capital use. I'm talking about decommodification of land. You're applying this concept where it doesn't work. The obvious important question when it comes to whether or not land or housing broadly is decommodified is what happens when you're no longer there. If you leave or die and the government seizes that, that means it wasn't really yours. It was theirs. You were just in it. We're talking about ownership here. If you own something but can't sell it to anyone else, you don't actually own it, do you? Okay? You're applying this concept because you think Tanky Annihilator. Every time I see you in chat, you're just whining about Twitter tankies. You don't know, Marx. Get out of my hair, honestly. If I remember your name, it's almost always a bad sign, okay? The applicability of the private personal property distinction isn't relevant when you can't sell the thing. Like, my chapstick is my personal property in the distinction that I use it for personal use, but I don't like sell it for capital. However, I could sell this. I don't know how I would. I'm sure one of you delusional parasocial nutcases would buy it, sure. I could sell this. I could make this like a mode of capital replication of investment. It is conceptually possible, yes? But if you personally owned your land in a decommodified system, you couldn't sell it to somebody else. Therefore, the distinction is not what we are talking about. You know less than me. Quit being annoying. We've been on this topic for like an hour. And I don't mean to be snide here. It's just this like, well, I know one thing about Marx. I know! Good Lord. You will call the local bureaucrat. You will talk to a nice lady in her 40s who calls you sugar. She will tell you that you seem like a sweet boy and that she's got just a couple perfect apartments that are just a few blocks away from the university. You will go and live in the studio apartment. You will pay nothing for it. You will wonder sometimes if you would be happier in a larger space, but understand that the social good demands that not everyone gets a gigantic mansion that's also somehow built in the middle of the city center. You will have cuties over from time to time. You will remark that it's actually kind of nice to have a cozy space. You will get married. You will petition the government to see if you can get a larger place that you can stay in because you want to have children. You will get 2 dogs. You will live. Can I get cats instead? Sure. What happens if, for example, someone is living in the housing near the university despite not being a student? Do they get evicted to make room for student demand? Yeah, the leasing would probably be on a year-by-year basis, and if your life condition no longer matches the ideal like space for that area, you probably would be relocated with some warning, right? For example, if you and your family live together in a big, like, 4-bedroom place that's further out from the town, but then as time goes on, people move or people die, and there's one person left in that house, yeah, no, get out of the house, right? Like, you could be given a year warning, like, hey, we'd like you to repetition for a local place to live in because, you know, we have families that would like to move there, and I think they'd be a better fit for that house, so on and so forth. Yeah, of course. That sounds awful. How? It's a finite resource, you selfish hog. Also, like, what would happen now is that you would be bankrupted by trying to pay the rent for such a massive place. What about growing tomatoes? I'm sure it would be very possible to get, like, quieter, larger, more pastoral spaces out further from the city center. There will always be places like that. Who would pay for the move? Just wondering? Government subsidy, of course. If they're covering the price of housing, they should certainly cover the cost of moving. They should provide the movers, you know? No, it helps to have a diverse age group around. I'm not saying that you get moved out when you hit a certain birthday. I'm saying massive mismatches in what housing is intended for and what is in that housing. Next, Vaush will tell us, hey, you're a murderer. We're going to execute you and harvest your organs to help better, more productive people. Are you... I can't even tell if you're being serious. It's a finite resource the state would manage to try to help as many people live in the best possible situation. Would you really selfishly demand that you get to keep the best possible residence even after other people move out or change or whatever? Like, do you not feel that would be antisocial? We're not talking... You can't get infinite growth in land, guys. We may be able to produce virtually infinite Funko Pops, but when it comes to living in, like, a city, if you want to live in LA, like, no, there are limits. That's the problem. That's why we can't use it as a speculative vehicle. It can't go up forever. Other things can't too, but land cuts out pretty quickly. You can't just, forever benefit from some larger, like, come on. Social pressure would prevail. People don't want to be dicks. I'm not saying that the state would evict you like 1 second after you get deemed, like you graduate or whatever. This is definitely capitalist realism in action. Yeah, chat would prefer to stay in a bunch of shithole apartments that are 40 minutes away from their work because that's all they can afford, rather than having nice stuff that's close to where they live and work in a neighborhood that's well suited for their needs, with the knowledge that if their circumstances change, there might be external pressures other than poverty keeping them from staying there indefinitely. Yes, because giving the government the power to decide to move people after they already live there is both authoritarian and Missouri, my dude, corporations can already do that. People who rent can already be removed from where they live and give society a sense of insecurity, which would give populace the chance they need to reinstate capital ownership. You're talking about a dystopia? Jesus Christ! We already rent! Oh my god! You could probably get like rental periods for more than a year, you know? Like if you had a big family and you were well secured in a location, you could probably get one for 4 or 5 years or something. Would repetitioning every 5 years really be that big? For ending the blight of property managed housing, the cost of this being once every 5 years or so, you would have to like reassert your interest in the property you're in to a local bureaucrat. Like, is this really? Like these pressures already exist. They're just done through pricing. All of these pressures already exist through cost of living, through rent. They're already here. The difference is right now they bankrupt people. This could be done much better, much more efficiently. How would this solution take community into account? Like if you live in a 5-bedroom and people move out, would they move you to a 1-bedroom far away from your home? Live in a 5-bedroom and people move out? You mean like with roommates? I'm not sure what you mean. Also, housing is terrible for markets because people's demands are warped. People want a lot of square footage, but in practice it makes them miserable. Yeah, it's people don't act rationally when it comes to stuff like this. It's really, really difficult. What about my friendly neighbors who I cherish? I don't... If you lived in a neighborhood right now, you could be forced to move because the rent increases. There was never a guarantee that you would get to live near the same people forever. But if you have to move, don't you think that like under this system, it would be possible to move you somewhere relatively near? The whole point is mixed development, right? I'm not saying that like, oh, you need to be moved. It's time for you to be moved to another city or whatever. Like it's possible there could be another tier of housing for different life circumstances, just like 5 minutes away. You could have all the small studio apartments for students or whatever be near the university, and literally like one commercial district away, there could be like apartments that are like 2-bedroom or whatever if you have more people or like whatever else, or there could be non-student studio apartments depending on what your life circumstances are, you know? There would be like a mixed development. The point of the variety would be like you couldn't have like a ranch right next to the university for obvious reasons, unless you went to university where I went to university. But, you know, like there would be variety in an area. People do value stability, so some renters' rights to protect people from forced moves do help. Of course, and you could also petition for that, right? Like, hey, I think that my circumstances are going to be unchanging for a while. I would like not a 1 or 2 year lease to this place. I would like a 5-year lease to this place. 5 years of stability is more stability than any human ever got through all of human history, okay? 5 years of housing stability? My God, you know? All of your ancestors would have killed for that. You would get it for free. Yeah, literally killed, by the way. When I say your ancestors would have killed for 5 years of housing stability, that's not a figure of speech. Vaush, this person is assuming everyone is a homeowner, not the actual reality of mass renting. True. Of course, my real position is that all homeowners are basically Hitler anyway, so I don't really care how they feel about this shift. Vaush, why is your argument against the flaws of your proposed system being these flaws exist in capitalism too, seeming like a blind spot? No. I don't think what I'm saying are flaws. I think efficiently reallocating people if they're massively mismatched to their current, like, house is not a flaw. I think that's good, actually. I don't think that 4-person families should live in studio apartments, and I don't think that single individuals should live in, like, big suburban, you know, 2-story houses. I don't think they should. I'm sorry. If you want to live in a big suburban 2-story house or whatever, then find roommates that you can do a collective petition with. We do this already with rent, or just get it to work. It's so obvious you have no idea how it is outside the dystopian shithole you call the US. Why is it when everyone disagrees with me, they talk like that? Why can't you ever just be like, hey, as someone who lives in this country, my experience with this thing gives me a different perspective. Why does it always have to be this vague nothing? And then I ask for you to clarify, and then I never get a response, or the clarification doesn't actually disagree with anything that I've talked about. You know, it's every single time. Why? Why be snide? I can be snide. I'm allowed to be. I'm the streamer. Also, when I'm snide, I can follow it up immediately. I'm not typing. I'm talking. Everyone's watching me. Why? Yeah, we'll get them over that. Not on fire yet. Yeah, we'd buy it off them, Cyberpirate. Tell me how this proposed system would work with rural living individuals. What difference would there be? There's a local bureaucrat at the county level, and they would say, hey, I already live in this house in this rural area. I like my little garden with tomatoes. This is a low demand area. It's not like people are flooding into rural areas to like pile up and they're basically non-existent housing availability. You know, I would like to continue living here. And the local bureaucrat would say, yeah, no reason to change that, basically. Enjoy that garden, you know? Stamp, and then you can keep living there. Vaush, the only streamer that can explain something more and make me agree with him less as he continues. What? Fair person, I'm describing a better society. this is not going to be an exception. Nobody likes moving. Yeah, nobody likes moving, but it's a part of life. It's part of life now and then. That's not a flaw in the system. Moving, do you think you should be born in a house and live forever? There, like literally everyone, no one gets to move for work, job, school, housing, love, marriage, children, anything. Just the one building you're born in, that's it. That's all. Like, that's just part of life. At least this way, the government would be subsidizing the process of moving. The state would send you movers. That would be better than this now. People already move. The government can make you move is a hard no, and it's not necessary to make decommodified housing work. The people who own the land that you live on and rent from can make you move in a variety of ways. But the government can make you move in this case would only be if there is a drastic mismatch between your living situation and the place you're currently at. For example, you would move into a small studio apartment next to the university on the condition that you're a student, knowing fully well that once you're not a student, you would have till the end of a year or whatever, arbitrary, and then the bureaucrat that you talk to would be like, okay, here are some other housing options in the area. What do you think would be a good fit for you? Is that so bad? We already have government subsidized student-only housing near universities. They're called dorms. I'm just talking about expanding the concept that already exists. And if they don't move, then you get evicted, of course. If you go and, hey, sign this paper if you want to live here. You need to be a student to live here. Okay, I have agreed to this by signing this. I am no longer a student, but I still want to live here. Okay, well, you have a year to agree to find a new place with us. You can call any time and we'll schedule you for a movement to one of the other available houses in this location. A year has passed, and despite not being a student, I have not chosen a new place and I want to keep living here. Why are you evicting me? Skill issue, I say. Skill issue. Good Lord. What if I want to live with my girlfriend or friends? Then do it. The system you're talking about is just an expansion of capitalist housing tyranny. Oh, I see. You're one of those Twitter commune anarchists who thinks your job after the revolution will be poetry and jerking people off. I see. You don't understand anything about resource allocation or the actual hard facts of the world, that there are finite things and finite people, and not everyone gets what they want, ever, under any system. Why? It's so antisocial, you know? You live in a society. Haven't you heard this? You don't, the house you live in isn't some magic bubble. It's not a simple domain that you've magicked for yourself, okay? It's a thing that exists and other people want it too. Don't be so selfish. You can make this system ethical, far more ethical than our current one, and free, mind you. Yes, Kanye, the government would immediately kill you. Yeah, but I don't want to talk about a slight ethical change, drumming Patrick. I want to talk about housing decommodification. Well, thank you, Shijikori. I appreciate that. By the way, what I'm talking about is not exactly crazy controversial, okay? This is just a pretty standard applied model of decommodified housing. It's not like super radical in leftist texts. I mean, any kind of leftist economic theory is going to be considered radical in application in a liberal sense, but like in the context of that theory, this is just a way of doing it, you know? I don't think it's especially out there. It's certainly not completely untested. Government management of housing isn't a new thing. It's existed before. And yes, they can make decisions about your housing and evict you. Ideally, they don't do that very much because, you know, it's disruptive. Like, if I'm a homeowner, Vaush, why would I ever support a system where I could suddenly be evicted? That's like asking, if you're a business owner, why would I support a system where you have to listen to the decision-making of the people beneath you? The answer is, I don't care. Like that's the whole problem, right? Like, well, how would you do all this communism if business owners and landlords don't like what you have to say? Well, yeah, sorry. They've been privileged for long enough, I feel. You will live a fine life. And you wouldn't be suddenly evicted, Howrock. It would be if you went into an area, there were provisions that you would agree on as you enter the house, and if you failed to meet those provisions, you would have a given length of time to have your housing reallocated. The government wouldn't just suddenly throw people around. That would kind of break the whole point. Right now, renters, landlords can move people around, but even they have to abide by restrictions and regulations for ousting people based on the leases or whatever else. You wouldn't just be suddenly ousted. You sign, I will continue to live here. This is like the requirements for me living here. And if you don't, you don't. What if I never want to leave the house where I grew up? Then you better continue to meet the requirements for occupying that property. Yeah, I agree, Blue Shift Star. I think that what I'm talking about is infinitely more stable as a system, more so than the market, for God's sake. You know? I mean, I grew up in Los Angeles. Half that city has a like bloody scar ripped through it from the consequences of gentrification. You know, what's happened throughout the place, the way interurban freeways have cut through neighborhoods and cut people off and da-da-da. Like, as if there's stability now, honestly. You're appealing to a illusionary ideal of stability to contrast against a better system. It's very frustrating. If your family lives together, Rube the Noob, then I don't see the issue with keeping them together. Good Lord, chat. Please? Herman. I just typed read Dungeon Meshi online. I got it. While it sounds better than our current system, it seems very open to corruption and bigotry, like local bureaucrats could just happen to only evict certain demographics. But that already happens with private companies. I think at least with the government doing it, like local government corruption, it'd be easier to file a petition with a higher government. Or their friends somehow always got bigger, nicer houses. This is like an unsolvable problem, because what you're asking me to do is remove the concept of in-group bias and corruption from any bureaucratic system, but they exist in all bureaucratic systems, right? I think that with a lot of oversight, you could do a better job, but this is like it's like a non-answer because it will always apply, right? Genuinely asking if a person wanted to move in with someone else, how would that work? Would they be prevented from moving if they didn't meet the standards? No, probably not. Because the standard would probably be permissive to anything like more compacted, but not less. So like if like a studio apartment would be offered to people who are just as one, but if you wanted to move in, you wouldn't get evicted because you have two in one. You could cram more people into a smaller space, but you couldn't cram smaller numbers of people into a larger space. If you have one person in a big suburban house, that would be too few. A family should live there, not just one person, right? But if you wanted to move in with another person in a studio, then like that'd be fine. The state doesn't have an issue with that, certainly. Unless there's like a safety issue. Would lawns still exist? Absolutely not. Absolutely. If you want a lawn, you are having a dense thicket of native like locally sourced wildflowers that you will have to use a machete to cut through, okay? If I see a single sprig of green grass anywhere in my city as a government official, I'm torching your house. Can I have a clover lawn? Yes, that's fine. I'm assuming it's a California talking point. It's an America talking point. You do realize the only way to politically keep the system going without mass protests and a removal of it would be an authoritarian state like China, right? No, I think you're delusional, and I don't even know where you're coming from in this. I'm describing a system that would be infinitely more humane, with less suffering, no homelessness, people getting houses that are closer to the things they want and need. Like, the system that I'm describing would be so much better for so many people. I genuinely don't know what would lead you to believe otherwise. What you're describing sounds awful. Ivan198, can you tell me what sounds awful about what I'm describing? You no longer have to pay for rent, housing, or moving. It's free. You no longer have that anxiety. No matter what happens, you lose your job or whatever else, you have a bed to go back home to. No matter what happens in your life, you always have a home. This is a guarantee given to you that most humans have never known. Most people today will never know it. For this, the government manages your property, repairs it when needed. You petition bureaucrats if you want to move or need to move. What about this sounds so awful? Putting your homes in the hand of a bureaucrat? Your homes are already in the hands of bureaucrats. Renting organizations are bureaucratic. If you have an individual landlord, then your home is in the hands of something worse than a bureaucrat. Your hand is in the home of an individual landlord. That's worse. They tend to be more corrupt, make worse choices, treat you to worse service. Most of it sounds really great, but do you not think inefficient sentimental attachment to homes is natural? Sure it is. Then just stay there. If I'm old and my family's all died and moved out or whatever, do I have to hope I die before the lease ends or else get moved out of my house? If you're near the end of your life, there might be some kind of government provision for like end of life stay, but also in most cases, you would be moved to a home. If you're old and near the end of your life, you probably wouldn't be living in that home for much longer anyway. Don't you have any family who could move in with you? Wouldn't that just be a way to incentivize community? Hey, I have like a government lease on a nice, big, comfortable house in the suburbs. You know, the people around me have died or moved away. Hey, young grandchildren of mine, you know, you're just out of college. Would you be interested in staying here? It's a nicer house than you'd be able to get otherwise because we got in on this like on a larger number of people. You know, it's fairly large and roomy. Da da da. Like, I don't know. I feel like this is a very human system if done appropriately and with the right rules and provisions. I think you could, you know, I think people could be very happy. I don't know if dying alone in your family home is necessarily better than either of the two options, either being put in like government housing is specifically intended for the elderly, which is a thing that should absolutely exist, or having like to petition people to come with you. You could also petition larger houses, true, though that would have to be specified in the lease. I agree, that sounds lovely. It's just a straight concern. Yeah, sorry for rambling on about this for so long. It's been a while since we've talked about anything even remotely theory-oriented. I'm not even getting into the specifics, by the way. I'm just talking about, to me, this is about capitalist realism, the extent to which it's possible to like do anything outside the market-driven system. It wasn't always market-driven, you know? There have been different systems, and there are existing systems of government-owned, you know, home ownership. We could take a look at that in a research stream sometime. You know, we could take a look and see what the consequences to that have been. Though obviously I wouldn't defend many historical invocations of it for the same reason that I don't like defend the Soviet Union. So it's more of a constant nudge from the government rather than forcing people out of their home. No, well, they'd force you, but you'd have like a buffer period. If you no longer met the requirements for the lease that you took, you could either argue for the altering of the lease, which might be possible, depends on the situation, or you'd have like a year period to find a new place. But they wouldn't just like kick you out or whatever. They would like, you know, if you were obstinate and you refused to move out of your own accord, they might try to evict you, and the eviction would be like a bureaucrat shows up at your place and is like, hey, you sure don't want to leave this place that you no longer meet the requirements for. We really need to like help you along here. And if you were obstinate to the point of not getting along with that, then like, yeah, I don't know, then you just get evicted onto the street. Like, good luck. Go to the local housing office if you want to like stop being obstinate. Probably wouldn't let people be homeless though, so you'd probably be roped up into like a homeless specific housing enclosure, which would be uncomfortable for you to bring all of your like moving equipment there and stuff, but at the same time that's kind of your fault. So I don't know, not really that sympathetic. If you have mental health issues that prevent you from managing the system effectively, there would obviously be like provisions for that, a reward that would help navigate that that dynamic. Infinite Rain, I don't really know if there's a way to talk about that like in the broad sense. It would be about local specific counterbalances to try to make sure that everything gets overlooked by multiple groups. Do you think under your systems, things like mansions, houses well above the minimum standard, should be commodities people can buy? No, absolutely not. Would there be housing meant for people wanting a longer expected stay? What do you mean? Like, you could get like 5-year leases, I assume, right? I mean, maybe even longer. I guess that depends on where it is. Probably not if you're in the city core, because that would be like a very, you know, high traffic area, depending on your job or whatever else. This addendum is so dumb and unnecessary, Vaush. There's no need to evict people in a decommodified system. Yes, if you decommodify the system but make no effort to efficiently allocate the finite resources that you've decommodified, at that point, you have no way of counterbalancing against a ton of really bad long-term effects that you could get from inefficient allocation. Imagine every downtown area dead and stagnant because all of the properties there are being held by people who never go out or shop or work in the area. Like, you know, you just have a bunch of people staying indoors all day when they're in mixed-use development directly above massive, thriving commercial centers. Or you have like rural areas that are like overfilled to every possible house, or like suburban areas or whatever. Like, you can't, like, what if you just had like one person each living in every giant McMansion that's been taken from the suburbs, you know? Like, you can't have that. What about if a person builds their own home? I'm sure if a person built their own home, the government would be fine with letting them live in that home, right? Like, I can't imagine, like, it's a rare instance and you'd be in the sticks, so I don't think the government would take, there would be very little reason for the government to go like, oh, the home that you just built and are now living in, like, no, you don't meet the requirements or whatever. You would also have to petition for them to do that, right? You couldn't just build a house like willy-nilly. That's their land. Well, that's all of your lands, right? How would people get the land to build their own home? They don't. It would be a plot of land they would have to ask the government for, same as everything else. I still don't get how it'd be sustainable to make it free to get a house. Why not? You could do free healthcare, too. In fact, we should. What would happen to the mansions that exist? Liquidated. Every mansion occupies a plot of land that could be more reasonably broken up into several houses or apartment complexes. There's no reason for them to continue to exist the way they do. Maybe some could be kept as like historical monuments, or you could have some weirdo partitioned homes, but for the most part, I think they should be liquidated. Community centers, if that works, yeah. Historic mansions, yeah, if it's historic, yeah, we do that already. Sure, Vaush, your system will work in an extremely idealistic, perfect society. I don't think anything that I'm describing is idealistic. I'm just talking about housing being treated like another utility, like just another basic local service the government manages. You know, like I don't think this is also an American thing. You don't believe a society exists around you. There are local government agencies you can call to talk to about stuff regarding your land, your local parks, your plumbing, your this, your that. All of these things already exist. You just don't interact with them that often because for the most part, people are unused to that. We think of ourselves as operating in bubbles, you know? It could be done. I just don't think it's that idealistic. You're idealizing bureaucracy. I'm not idealizing it. I'm just saying it's a necessary evil. Bureaucracy is how you manage large tasks. You would need to. It's idealistic because of our current political climate. Well, yeah, I'm not saying it's going to be done tomorrow or even in my lifetime. I'm just saying it's a system that I would like. I want privacy arguments. Seems like cope. Yeah, I don't know what this has to do with privacy, really. Would this be funded by tax or government owned? Government owned. All right. Is water and electricity decommodified? No, it's not. You do pay for them, but they have been made in most places into municipal services, which means that the government has stricter rules for how they can be offered to you. There's a reason why, water and electricity has to already be hooked up to your house, usually. And when you use it, it's not like, you're buying like a day pass or call your local private water company for a 1-week special deal on getting water to your house specifically. No, you get the water, you get the electricity, and there are flat rates. There's like proportional to what you use it for. And usually the cost is a lot lower than if you were doing anything like that in a private sense, like in a directly private, like communicating directly with a business sense. So, it's a step. Would construction and repair services be state-owned? God, yes, absolutely. Curious what you think would happen to existing super luxury spaces and mansions, just destroy them? Yeah, of course. 100%. Gleefully. Keep a few of them, I guess, if there's any historic value. They are temples to every worst impulse. They should be destroyed. They're heretical to this new world we're building. If I can't get more than a studio apartment because I live by myself, then why would I be a skilled worker over something dead easy like night security guard? You could. Well, first of all, wait. The housing is free. The quality of the job that you have wouldn't dictate the quality of the house. That would be contradictory to the whole point of decommodified housing. The studio apartment that I was talking about would be like if you're in the city core, if you're a student, if you're a very young person. But if you were older, like say graduated, you're in your 20s or 30s, but you live by yourself, you could have a 1-bedroom apartment, sure. Maybe if you're further out, there's less competition for that space, and they would even afford you like a larger space, like a larger 1-bedroom. Would you need a 2-bedroom if you're living on your own? I mean, probably not, but if you found a space where housing wasn't in demand in that, bracket, they might afford you the ability. I'm slow brain, so would hotels still be paid for or just like provided on a temporary? Well, I'm only talking about decommodifying housing. Maybe hotels could still exist. Like, you want to be able to travel and go to another place without having to petition the local government office for a year lease there, obviously. Hotels would still exist, yeah, under the system that I am describing. Vaush, to be clear, you're arguing for a system of rental from the government as opposed to government charters. Unless you're an active menace to society, I think it's utterly dystopian to be burdened with proving your right to live in your own home periodically. The only proof you would need is how many people you have in the home or what class of citizen you are. Like if you're a student, for example, right? Because a student should be very close to the university itself. I don't think it's dystopian, and you already have to prove your right to live in any house you live in right now. It's called having enough money. You need to provide pay stubs indicating you can afford like 3 times rent or whatever. Hey, Beetle. And I agree. But like, again, I'm not saying like there's some like, sorry, comrade, we looked at your charts and it's like, you only worked 96 hours last week. And this nice apartment only afforded to people who work at least 100 hours a week. I'm afraid you're going to have to leave now. That's not even remotely, it's like a cartoonish stereotype of what I'm talking about here. But yeah, you know what? If you're a 30-something, I don't think you should be in student housing anymore, you goddamn creepo. Yeah, I think the government should kick you out. The dorms would kick you out. They already would have kicked you out. And there it is. Vaush wants there to be classes of oh, you're doing sarcasm, okay. But yeah, like if you shouldn't be in the dorm housing if you're like graduated, right? I mean, and likewise, you know, I think that if you're in like if there's like a mixed use development area in the city core, I don't think that basically any person should get to live there, right? That area should be reserved ideally for people who are in a position in their life where they're going to take advantage of the resources, because that's very, very in demand. For every 10 people who want a house in that area, there'd be one house available, right? That's how it is. It's a finite resource. You can't make everything for everyone, you know? Like these like very up and up urbane downtown areas probably should be like, I don't know, guys. I'm not saying like they should be kicked out or whatever. I'm just saying that if I thought, hey, how do I efficiently allocate people here? I'm thinking of like young professionals or people who like to, you know, go about the place, spend their time out something, not maybe like socially regressive internet World of Warcraft addicts or retirement age people who don't leave the house anymore, you know? Like, I don't know. Should the government kick somebody out of downtown because they're retirement age? Well, not unless that's what they agreed to in the lease, right? Sign this lease paper here if you agree. Once you retire and no longer work in the area, you can no longer occupy this specific house because it's very in demand, and there are people who work in this area who would really like to be able to live that close to their job. And then you would sign it. And then 5 years later, you'd go, no, how can you kick me out and give me 1 year time to move into another free house that's going to be provided to me by the state because I signed the paper that said that this exact thing would happen? No. You know, what housing do elitists get? What elitists? How would we manage ADA compliance and accessibility for those with disabilities? I think if anything, that'd be like much easier than it is now. All housing would have to be ADA compliant, of course, right? What if somebody wants to be in their home for like 20 years because they have kids or something? Then that should be fine, unless you're in a house where for some reason they don't think it's not efficient for there to be like I don't like what would happen that would mean the state would think, you know, oh, they shouldn't be able to reapply or whatever. Well, wait, they don't really have a choice but to sign that paper, right? It's not like there are other options that don't kick you out at a certain age, right? Well, yeah, for that, but then they chose to choose that property, right? Like they could have chosen another property that didn't have that provision in the lease. If you want to live in this like upbeat downtown area, then that's the agreement, you know? The upbeat downtown area shouldn't stagnate because all the people living there don't actually give a fuck about the upbeat downtown area. What should we do with the Amish? I don't respect the Amish. Under communism, I would not give them any special legal protections. You will learn to use the cell phone. You will use a bidet after shitting in the toilet. Modernity is here and you are a part of it. Vaush, this is literally the housing equivalent of you chose that job. How do you complain? Mzeri, can you please think? Please. You want to get a house in a city. You go to the local bureaucrat's office and you say, hey, this is what I am. I'm this age. This is my job. This is like da-da-da. This is what I'm interested in. I like theater. I like parks. I have dogs, whatever. And the bureaucrat says, how wonderful. Here we are with a few areas locally that you can move to at your choosing. We can reserve these properties for you for 2 weeks. Past that, we'll have to offer them to others. But in the meantime, take a look and let us know. And you have a variety of them. Some of them further out from the city core, some of them closer in. The one closest in, the one that's in the really upbeat, hip and happening, economically productive area says, hey, if you're here, you need to have a job in this area because there are lots of jobs here and few houses. People who work here want to live here, so we should reserve that. Now, you're lucky. You have a job in that area, so you can get this hip and hopping area, okay? It's a 3-year lease, all right? But year 2, you no longer work there. Now, you're not kicked out immediately because, hey, it's decommodified, right? You don't need to pay. You could just sit in there. It's decommodified housing. You could just sit in your bed and jerk off. But the lease expires at the end of year 3. So the government's office, they contact you and they're like, hey, you know, your lease is coming up. And we notice you don't work here anymore. With that being said, this was a requirement that you signed into in the lease, so here are another list of properties currently available that don't have that prerequisite. And then what? And then what? What's wrong with this? This sounds dreamlike. This sounds so much better and more efficient. This sounds better than what we have right now. What if the tenant has a mental health crisis where they can't work effectively but still need the space to recover? I mean, if you get fired from the job, that was a provision in the lease, and you would have to move given the grace period. It's not like you'd be moved out immediately. But if you're having a mental health episode, that, like, I think mental health care should also be decommodified. But, like, yeah, again, you wouldn't be moved out, like, on the dime, right? You would have, like, grace periods of a long time. But, like, yeah, if you were too depressed to meet the requirements for the housing area that you're in, like you're in a student housing and you drop out because of mental health issues, then yeah, you shouldn't just keep the housing indefinitely. This is a disastrous idea. Why? No wonder. There would still be excess housing to choose from, just like in the current market. You'd only have to move people around in high demand areas. Important to keep that in mind. Yeah, it's not, I sincerely doubt any set of economic circumstances would lead people to getting shuffled around in, like, out of the city core suburban areas, right? Like, people, the real, like, hip and hopping and, you know, like, big movement areas would be in the city core, downtown, big commercial districts, stuff like that. I really, really doubt people who live like 30 minutes from downtown would be getting reshuffled by the government. They might get like 10-year leases, you know, fucking. What about waterfront property? That's in high demand and expensive. Who gets the lake view? Unironically, I think we should destroy it. I'm kind of not joking. I hate waterfront property. The waterfront property should be kept as parks, resorts, commercial districts, areas of public interest. The idea that these gorgeous waterfront properties should be locked away so some wit with a 7-figure income can, like, sit there and cheat on his wife, like, with a nice view. That, yeah, I that shit's a public good. You know, just a personal opinion of mine. How would this get integrated? I'm just talking about what I would like long term, like a system, not even necessarily an ideal one. I'm just talking about what I envision when I talk about decommodified housing. That's it. Yeah, Chicago benefited massively from their lakefront development. How would we fund schools without the incredibly racist way of property taxes? We'll have to find a new kind of racism to fund local schools. Yeah, racism too. Well, Beetle Moses, it's been 2 hours of talking about decommodifying housing. Wait, no wonder. Did you ever respond to what I said? I'll tell you why. My family lives in the system in Polish communism. I'll split the difference, say parts of it sound nice. Okay, whatever. I'm not arguing to defend Polish communism. Everyone's complaining about being shuffled around when the problem in e.g. European downtowns is that people are holding on to downtown properties as an investment. Yeah, I don't think a lot of people understand that people getting shuffled out of high-use areas as they're no longer, like, optimal residents for it would mean more in high-use areas. Like, you can't get those right now because they're $50 trillion or held by boomers who don't leave the house, or held by investment companies who are sitting on it waiting for it to reach $50 trillion to sell, you know. Whereas the whole point of relatively high turnover with warning and grace periods in an area like that would be allowing more people to benefit from it. Do people not realize there will also be a government that'll put you in jail if you rape and murder people? Yeah, I swear to God, I've been waiting this entire time for somebody to say, like, well, what happens if I destroy my house then and the government shows up, huh? For, like, as if I answered, you would be arrested, they'd get, like, really indignant with me or something, you know? Like, that's what I'm waiting on, that, like... You know, like, what an authoritarian system describing everything that already happens, you know? What about the countryside, Gehong? We can just build more higher and high-use areas. There are limits to that, Harok. Yeah, Kisuadi, it's just like a capitalist realism thing, I guess. What about accidental destruction? Like, would you be punished if you have a fire? Well, you'd probably have to at least pay for the damage, right? I mean, it's like that right now with renting. If you do, like, malicious destruction, that might be a crime. Would you be able to have a summer house? Absolutely not. Why not, honestly? Because then you would own a house. Yeah, I gotta disagree with you on this front. Oh, yeah. Really cement the negative conception people have chat right now. Come at me, the socialist, from the perspective of owning a summer house. Yeah, you're gonna win on that front optically, you know? What about people who have real estate holdings in 17 cities? You know, I don't give a shit. Okay, you want to go vacationing once a year, you can go to a goddamn lodge, all right? There are plenty of provisions you could make that wouldn't involve you owning a separate house. The government's not going to give you two, you know? I'm like, why not have summer reallocations? Why would that happen? There's living somewhere and there's staying in a hotel or a lodge or any kind of, like, dedicated temporary provision, but you wouldn't own that. Why would you own that? Yeah, there can be summer homes, but you couldn't own one. You could go to one, but you'd pay for that. That'd be more like a hotel, right? Socialist timeshares. Ugh, nobody likes timeshares. Salvi, this would be literally less of a logistical nightmare than the current system we have now. Well, you don't own it, Vaush. Like, have an arrangement where you could live in one place most of the year, then swap out during the summer. Okay, but then who goes into your house while you're doing that? Like, it just sits there empty, wasting space? You mean you have a separate family where you just, like, switch, like, they live in the summer home half the year, and then you switch like that? I don't know, sometimes maybe. This sounds fascist to me. The answer is no. No summer homes. Nobody, it's in the middle of nowhere with a nice forest view. Why would the government give you a separate, nice house with a forest view? What social purpose does that serve? This is bourgeois frivolity, okay? You can go to a lodge. Yeah, like cabin resort homes. You can rent those for like a month or two. But you would pay for them. The government can rent out housing for summer use for 1 week at a time, cheap and yeah, but that would be rented properly, like a hotel or a lodge or whatever else. Yeah, that's not decommodified housing. That's bourgeois luxury. If you want that, you're paying for it. What if the government built and maintained these summer homes? Yeah, I mean, you're just talking about like them running a resort or a lodge or whatever. How would lodges or hotels even exist in the scenario? Those aren't decommodified. I'm only talking about decommodified housing. The logistics of this seem just as bad. I don't think the logistics of what I'm describing is bad. How do you pay for things in a decommodified society? You don't. But I'm not talking about a decommodified society. I'm talking about decommodified housing. That can happen, Kitch20. If land is decommodified, then holiday resorts would need to be too, no? No. Housing is decommodified, and the land on it is owned by the government. But that doesn't mean that, like, hotels would need to be decommodified. I'm just talking about housing. Are the farms decommodified? The farmers would be liquidated. We talked about this. How would renovations, floor plan changes be approached in the system? Would you have to run by the government every time you put a nail in the wall? I imagine there'd be local rules. It would probably depend on like the county or the municipality or whatever. Sure. But you wouldn't be able to make big alterations to your housing unless it was approved by the government. Sure. Yeah. They would probably just have like, maintenance people would be like, oh, you want to do that? Okay. Or they would do it. If you paid them, you pay the government, or you can do it yourself. Yeah, basically the same as with landlords today. Be kind of a case-by-case thing. Yeah, even privately owned homes have to follow requirements when it comes to stuff, right? There are regulations on residential development. Even if you own the house that you live in, you can't just do whatever to it. Oh, Nicky Bugs, that's a whole other question. Not the same kind you're talking about. Yeah, they are. What would we do with the current summer homes with no value other than being vacation space? Would they just be empty? Sure, yeah, I guess. The government would probably just let them rot. If they could be turned into useful property, they should, but really depends on how far out they are. If they could be turned into regular housing, seems wasteful. Well, if there's something there that could be wasted, the government should take it, of course. Why do people care so much about summer homes? I don't know. I grew up in Los Angeles. My summer home was the home that I grew up in. These people live in, I don't know, like New York or Chicago or something, and it gets cold, and they like the log cabin. I don't know. I don't even know. When I picture a summer home, I'm thinking of like some giant A-frame log cabin that costs $2 million overlooking a private lake. I know they're not mostly like that, but that's what I think of. That's what's in my head, you bourgeois. I don't know, Muck. How many people does this apply for? I don't know. I think I've answered enough hypotheticals. We're 30 minutes out from the end of stream, and I feel like I've spent the entire goddamn day on this. Not that I mind the hypothetical discussion, but like, Jesus Christ. It's really, the thing that gets me about this is just like, it's the capitalist realist thing. I'm not saying that my ideas are perfect or whatever. I'm basically just reiterating a pretty simple and easy to understand iteration of decommodified housing logic. But like, the thing that gets me, I guess, is a lot of people asking questions that betrays their misunderstanding of how the system currently is. Oh, you mean people would have control over whether or not you live there? They do already. You mean people could control whether or not you could make renovations? They do already. You mean you could be ousted with it? They do already. You mean they do already. All of these things already exist. The only difference is that you're paying a ton of money, and rather than having an electable government official that you can appeal to if there's a problem, it's a corporation that can do literally whatever they want. Anything they want. You think anything holds them? They're entirely profit-driven. You think that housing is an elastic enough market that they will respond to shifts in... I'm sorry, have you ever heard of a bad rental company going out of business because people didn't like how they handled their rental properties? Because I never have. Seems like a pretty strong disconnect between quality of service and whether or not they make a lot of money. We did, Era. What's the regulations surrounding building your own home? That depends on the area. You'd have to look up. That's probably like a county and city thing. How would this system handle eminent domain? Pretty easily, considering it would be all government run and owned already, right? Just imagine VGG making the same complaints about the concept of public healthcare. It is true that a lot of people in chat have literally been doing the death panels, the government chooses your doctor things that Republicans were doing for years and years under the Obama administration. Like, the exact logic and the exact arguments being applied to housing rather than to healthcare. You mean the government's going to be able to decide who my doctor is? You mean the government is going to get to decide who can or can't receive medical treatment? That sounds dystopian. Which people effortlessly identified, at least I hope you would have, as conservative nonsense warbling back then. But, you know. You literally said the government could evict you. You can already be evicted right now by a landowner. Also, yeah, the government could make decisions about whether or not you could receive certain health care. Yeah, of course the government could evict you. Obviously, evictions happen. That's life. Grow up. Yeah, the government can eminent domain your ass if they want. Yeah, me introducing the concept of police and law to people. You're telling me that if I beat my child, I could go to prison? The majority of people live in homes that they or their family own. They can't just be evicted. They can be eminent domained. There are systems the government can use to oust people from housing if they want to. Also, they can be removed from it because they can't pay their property taxes, or other things can force them out. Also, I should add, I just don't care. Sorry. You have been privileged. They got those houses during a period of time when widespread land and capital accumulation was not as rampant as it is today. We see now what the end state of this economic system always was. I just don't care. I don't care, dude. I'm sorry. I grew up in LA. You know what homeowners are? Parasites. All of them. Every last one. They go to all their local meetings and vote against new property development so they can keep homeless people on the streets, poor people out of the city, just so that their retirement package, their house, they can sell for $60 trillion once they've decided to go move to Florida and drown as the sea tide takes them, okay? I don't give a They are a politically repugnant group of people, all right? I don't care. I'm sorry. There are lots of business owners in America too, you know, and I think they would also probably, on average, live much, much better lives in a broadly communistic economic system, or at least a workers' democracy. It's different outside of LA and San Francisco. No, it's not. That's cope. It's more magnified in coastal cities. That trend, what homeownership does and means, is everywhere. You turn your house, the place you live, into an investment that you want to sell off. How do you keep an investment worthwhile? You make sure its value appreciates. How do you make sure the value of property appreciates? By making sure the supply is limited. The trends follow everywhere. It's what happens when housing is commodified. Because you couldn't own housing, Satanic Cabal. God willing, may we live to see a future where the idea of a person owning a home is as repugnant to the minds of everyone as the idea of a person owning another human. Let children grow up and in elementary school learn that in years past, Americans used to own land like petty dictators. They could own that land and do whatever they wanted with it. They could make any manipulation they wanted to the local market, keep black or poor people from being able to afford housing in the area. They voted in collectives to keep cities stagnant. But then we got rid of all that and things were better. God willing, everyone pray. So if you got 1/4 an acre of land from your grandpa living in a trailer is as bad as a California McMansion owner, you are a repugnant whiner. I despise you. Your blood is thin and it would run clear if you were cut. I hate you, gay hong. You're not gay. You're straight. Whining. Your broad criticisms of the nature of commodifying land that people live on, you're targeting me and my... I don't give a shit about the 1/4 acre of land you got from your grandpa living in a trailer, okay? Come on. You know... What do you think the government's going to do if they took that land? What do you think? What? The government's going to reallocate your trailer? Like, oh, the bureaucrat for your county has decided, actually, you must be moved from your... Are you kidding? You think people are fighting for that? Come on. Jesus Christ. Everyone, everyone in chat is a cosmopolitan socialite, and then you say, "Hey, decommodify housing," the thing I've believed for years, and then it's like, "Oh, what about all of the log cabins that I've built next to lakes? What about all the trailers that I live in on the quarter acre of land that I bought for $6 and a stick of dynamite?" Come on. We will make every home a summer home. How would artists be treated in your system? I don't understand what you mean. No shot, I left for 30 minutes. We're still on this. It's been like 2 hours, not just 30 minutes, but you're right. We have to move on now. This is ridiculous. I keep saying I want to move on, then I see something else. Like I'm about to do right now. Vaush, I say this coming from one such family. A lot of this stuff is sentimental value attached to property that's been in a family for long stretches. Okay? If that property is in an area that is in high demand and you no longer occupy it or meet requirements for efficient use of that land, then I'm sorry. If you want to keep it, then stay on it. And if you want to keep it but not stay on it, then get the fuck over it. I just like sentimental value. This is you know what is sentimental? Fascism. Fascism is sentimental. The union of kitchen futurism, always looking backwards while running forwards, okay? That's sentimental, all right? Don't talk to me about sentimentality. We're talking about policy. You will keep your damn homes. Okay, we need to move on. What is your alternative to summer homes then? The alternative to summer homes then, Satanic Cabal, is me holding you up by your ankles and shaking you for all of your bourgeois cash. I will grab you by your ankles and jostle thousands out of you, you bloated wealthy fuck. The alternative to summer homes? I grew up in Beverly Hills and the idea of owning a summer home sounded ludicrous to me then. What summer home are you talking about? Good Lord. Maybe it's more of an East Coast thing. I don't know. Or a Northeast thing. Jesus, what's the alternative to summer homes?